crypto-clothesline. We're glad to be here with you. Hanging out the crypto laundry. Getting all the crypto info for you. Crypto-clothesline. Crypto-clothesline.
Good morning, Amy Rose.
Hello.
How are things on the East Coast apart from rubbish trucks, which did interrupt the middle of our podcast today? Little monkeys.
Yeah, I don't mind. They're overflowing again, so I'm glad to see the rubbish trucks. And I had a rental inspection also halfway through the interview that I didn't mention. I was like, what the hell is happening? Why does all this crap happen in the middle of interviews?
Oh, you're kidding me? You had a rental inspection while we were speaking? That was very cool. I didn't pick up on a single rent inspection vibe.
No, well, I actually messaged the lady because I had a couple of other meetings today. I said to her, please just come in, do what you need to do. That's fine. She just waves to me and smiles at me and I do little waves and smiles and then that's that. Anyway, it's done now, which is great because I hate them.
Oh, it's such an invasion of privacy. And we've got this whole business on surveillance coins and cloak coin and, all this thing about keeping things private. And here we are. Our homes are opened to complete inspection, literally on a 3-monthly basis. It seriously sucks.
And I don't know if they do this to you, but they come in and take photographs.
Really?
Oh, yeah, on a tablet.
Oh, the one thing that I hate? Yeah, what are they going to do with that data? Why do they need it? Is it sort of visual proof or something? It's so invasive.
Oh, it's disgusting. But it's only temporary until I get over my perfectionist issue with finding the perfect block of land. And everyone just go get that one. Just go get. No, it needs to have this, and I'm just over the top. It's getting a bit ridiculous.
Well, I guess there's lots of rent money going down the drain too, but hey, there's all divine timing with everything. But I was going to say I had this visual image of a rent inspection that I used to have. Our current lady is quite chilled, but you just see that flick of the wrist where they do the dust control, and inspect the end of a long false-nailed finger. Oh, far out. Just get out of my house.
But having said that, these ladies are quite nice. They're so kind. She's lovely. I don't think she likes doing it. I don't think anyone wants to do it, but it's just a job.
Yeah, it is what it is. So we had a great talk today with tone-vays.
And he's lovely.
Yeah, it was great. There was quite a lot of trading talk and I wondered if we would lose a lot of our listeners in that bit, totally honest, because it's not usually the sort of thing that we cover in the podcast, but I thought, well, this is important because it's an absolute important part of the cryptocurrency world, backed up obviously by blockchain. So
I think if we remember that every single day we're faced with risks, and it's not just in cryptocurrency trading or futures trading, it's just everything. You need to weigh up your risks and you need to chill out. People make decisions all the time and freak out afterwards. Weigh up, be logical about this stuff, people. If you're going to buy a bomb of a car, weigh it up. It's probably going to break down every 10 minutes. Think about that. Spend a bit more money. Do the right thing, crazy people.
Doesn't that go with the ethos, spend less now, spend triple later?
An ounce of prevention is a pound of cure.
Oh, that's a good old-fashioned 50s number you brought out a few times. I got it. Now I feel like I'm on a game show. Speaking of nailed hands, I'm now pointing to the Price is Right on my right here. We would like to welcome you to the Crypto Clothesline. Our show is about helping women join the blockchain wealth revolution for themselves and their families. And oddly enough, women are generally referred to our podcast by men.
Our names are my-rose-goodey and abheeti-kathryn-pass, and we're speakers in blockchain and crypto, and we're on this mission.
We're learning together with you. We're talking with leading experts in the space. We're exploring cutting-edge technology projects that are shaping the future for our children.
This podcast is about intelligence and growth, and our values are for peace, harmony, and collaboration with the planet.
We are user-supported. That means that we basically get paid through our Patreon.
And we really need some support at the moment. Abheeti doesn't like me begging, but imagine me right now on my hands and knees saying, hey, everyone, if you love the podcast, you need to A, contribute, and B, change the rubbish collection day to some other day where we're not recording.
Keeping it real, love, keeping it real.
To become a patron, go to www.crypto-clothesline.com/patron.
And from there, you can click on the link, and there are various different levels that you can join. It can be $4 a month, less than the cup of coffee, and you can go right up to the $20 a month contribution level, where you get lots of different lurks and perks, lots of inside stories, lots of information, videos, and audio recordings which are not released for the public.
So jump on board. Right along.
Today we had a really interesting and varied conversation with tone-vays. I would call him, well, he calls himself a content creator. He has over 70,000 followers on YouTube, and he's certainly an influencer.
And he's definitely given us some tips and tricks. He's influenced us. He's given actually a majority of the crypto and blockchain space participants a lot of advice over the years.
Yeah, I saw his presentation at UWA, the University of Western Australia, just a short time ago, and it was a really fascinating presentation. For the first few minutes, I thought I was going to be completely lost because it did sound like a lot of tech speak, and I was like, oh my gosh, I've got a whole hour of this. But then he started to get into the history of Bitcoin and the way that the forks happened and the reason and the influences and the people behind the way that the market moved, and it was really, really fascinating. During the question time, I asked him 2 questions. One was around surveillance, and he was quite surprised to learn that when you come into Australia, that the authorities can seize your laptop and your phone and basically copy all your contacts like they do, Amy Rose, with a good colleague of ours. But the second question I asked him, and he was basically publicly recorded as, yes, agreeing to come on the podcast. Hence, we spoke to him today.
Woohoo! Virtual high five.
Ka-ching! So let's have a listen. Tone, welcome to the Crypto Clothesline. You're an independent content creator at tone-vays.com, and you've got a YouTube channel with over 70,000 followers. And from your homepage, I see that you're an expertise in economic trends, trading, and risk analysis. You've been involved in the cryptocurrency ecosystem since early 2013, and you're active in spreading relevance and importance of this technology with the notion that it's going to help to promote economic freedom. Whew, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be on.
Thanks for coming.
Tone, you and I met recently in Perth at UWA, the University of Western Australia, where you were giving a talk. I was there with my daughter and another colleague. And it was really, really interesting because you spoke about the history of Bitcoin together with a whole heap of other things. Can you talk a little bit about why you're in Australia?
Sure. Because of my YouTube channel, I do have an audience all over the world, but there's a very large audience here in Australia. So it was about time I came to Australia and met a lot of people that continue to watch my channel and support my work. And since it's my first time in Australia, I decided to spend an entire month here. So I started in Perth, then went on to Melbourne, currently in Sydney. And then next week, I will move on to Brisbane before continuing with my 4-month travel and speaking trip. I'm going to go back to Singapore, then New Zealand, then South America, and eventually back to the US.
That sounds like a real jet-setter lifestyle.
Tone, I was researching you quite a bit, but also stalking you a little bit. I went back to 2014, where on the Liberty Life train, and you were talking about the trading rules you were talking about with the oil contracts on the futures market. And you mentioned when trading to have a plan and not to panic. But I'm wondering if you can give a couple of tips to people who are getting into the crypto space, who are going to trade. What are 3 big tips that you would like to share with the world?
Yeah, those are pretty much the biggest tips. It's funny that you mentioned that article. That was probably the only article I've ever written about an actual trade that I have done, because with my lifestyle of educating people how to trade, I just don't have much time to do it. Ironically, I publicly announced a trade in Bitcoin just last month, and it was the same exact scenario as the oil trade I described. You gotta have proper risk management. No single trade should ever take you out of the profession. That has to be rule number 1. And rule number 2 is don't panic. Because if you have the right plan, even if your trade goes against you, you should have been prepared for it. The same exact thing happened on my oil trade. I pride myself on entering very probabilistic trades that are immediately profitable based on statistics. And ironically, both of the trades that I was public about, that did not happen. Those trades immediately went into the red, but I had proper risk management on both of those trades. What happened with my Bitcoin trade recently is that I shorted Bitcoin around mid-October. So about a month ago, I shorted Bitcoin around $6,200 with the expectation that there's going to be a crash in the price of Bitcoin down to 5,000. And within, I think, 48 hours, Tether, what people refer to as a stable coin, became unstable, and the price of Bitcoin rallied all the way to $7,000, causing a big negative position in my portfolio. But I accounted for that weird possibility in that my trade was designed for me not to panic unless the price goes all the way to $7,500. So by the price going $800 against me, which is probably about 10% of the price of an asset, it may seem unreasonable, but if you know that Bitcoin is volatile and you know that it can move 10% against you on a random incident, and your trade accounted for that possibility, I did not panic. I stayed with that trade. And if it wasn't for, there were other things involved that basically my account ended up being closed down, which was, out of my control. But had my account not been closed down, that trade would have been immensely profitable today because I would have held on to that trade because the Bitcoin did exactly what I expected it to do. It just did it 1 month later. But my trade also accounted for that. I gave myself 3 months for the price to crash down to 5,000. I accounted for me being wrong up to 20%, and that trade was properly set up and properly put in place, and I never panicked all throughout. And that's another really good lesson for traders is if you have the right plan, you should never, ever have to panic and scramble.
A lot of our listeners are not actually necessarily traders. So what you're talking about is putting parameters in place like a stop loss or take profit, depending on if you're going up or down, if you're going on a long or a short, in order to protect your potential losses and possibly even make less money, but at least get out of the game before you potentially lose the lot.
Yes, what people don't understand is they expect traders to be able to perfectly sell the very top to the penny or perfectly buy the very bottom to the penny. And in reality, not only is that impossible, successful traders don't do that. I mean, I can sit here all day long on my videos and try to guess the tops or guess the bottoms. But when it comes to putting your money on the line, it needs to only be the case when you are very certain that the price is going to move somewhere. And people try to make fun of the fact that I've been bearish and I've been saying the price of Bitcoin is going to keep going down to $5,000 and lower since the middle of January. So I've been saying this for almost 11 months. But the first time I made a trade was only a month ago, and people have a hard time comprehending why did I only make a trade a month ago and I missed all of the profits I could have made between $15,000 at Bitcoin when I started being bearish on the market and $6,000 at Bitcoin and eventually took the short at 6,000. Well, because statistically, I had 20 times more confidence that we would fall from 6,000 to 5,000 than I ever did from 15,000 down to even 10,000. Even though I had to say that I am bearish and I am expecting the price to fall from 15,000 to 10 and then to 8 and then to 6, I wasn't confident enough to put my money on it. I was only 55 to 60% confident that we were going to fall. Obviously, I'm not going to tell people we're going higher if I'm 60% confident we're going to fall. But me being 60% confident is just not enough to put a leverage trade on. But last month, I felt that I was 85 to 90% confident we were going to fall down to $5,000. And people just can't comprehend that. Your chances of winning a lot of money is not how to place a bet. If you're going to a horse race and there is some horse that's 100 to 1 odds of winning, that's not the horse you necessarily want to bet on, even though you have a chance to win a lot of money. The chances of winning that money is small. In reality, you should be betting on the horse that's not 100 to 1 underdog, but maybe a 2-to-1 favorite. If you have confidence that they misallocated and it's not really a 2-to-1 favorite, it should be a 4-to-1 favorite because you have some kind of a statistical advantage of that horse winning. So it's not always about how much you can win. It's your chances of winning that money.
It's about education. It's all of your psychology, isn't it? You have people with a high risk tolerance and people with a much lower risk tolerance and the amounts that they're playing with. So I think there is so much that comes into trading that's over and beyond the red and the green candle and the logic.
Yeah, absolutely. Trading is experience. I've never met any young, hot traders that did not struggle in the beginning. And I've been doing this publicly in Bitcoin, predicting the price of Bitcoin publicly for 4 years. Just like the article you pointed to, that was probably written just before I started writing for Cointelegraph, this kind of analysis. And people didn't like me back in 2014 because I was bearish on the price of Bitcoin. But people forget I was one of the biggest bulls cheering Bitcoin on all throughout 2016 and most of 2017, even at a time where people were scared. People were scared of the hard fork. People were scared in 2016 after the big bear market, and I was the one cheering it on. Everyone was happy with me during the bull market, but reality sets in, and people just have a hard time comprehending that Bitcoin is a speculative asset like everything else, and it's subject to fear and greed.
Tone, I wanted to ask you, we don't have a lot of time because unfortunately you've had to go off to another appointment in your studio, which sounds all very VIP. But I wanted to ask you about the recent Barcelona cruise. There were some disputes that got raised, and they were certainly aired very publicly on social media and other forms of media between Roger Ver, Jimmy Song, and you. Each of you are 3 very famous influencers in the crypto space. Can you comment on that?
Sure. It was unfortunate that Bitcoin ended up splitting into 2 sides, and the people both thought that they had Bitcoin. However, it was pretty obvious from the start that BCH, Bitcoin Cash, that I like to refer to as Bcash, even though the Bitcoin Cash supporters find Bcash derogatory, but they only find it derogatory because they're trying to steal the branding of Bitcoin. It was obvious what Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the one that's valued at 95% more money. It's like saying, hey, I have a version of gold. It is better than gold, but it's worth 95% less. That's not how it works. The side that basically was pretending to be Bitcoin continues to be very vocal about it. And they do have a lot of money, and they do have a lot of influential people trying to convince other people that they are the real Bitcoin, and that's unfortunate. And we were always against that side of the fork because we knew that it was insecure, and we knew that it was centralized, and we knew that it couldn't last as a trustless, censorship-resistant, unconfiscatable form of value transfer. And right now, sometime in about 15 hours from this recording, I believe at 4:30 p.m. UTC time on Thursday, November 15th, there's going to be a serious reorganization of the BCH side. And I'm going to be doing like a 4 or 5 hour live stream. And it's possible that coin can actually come to an end. And we were warning people about this. And even during the debates, I continue to stress the fact that the BCH blockchain is insecure and unstable. And using it as a store of value is outright dangerous for your, financial freedom. And we will see in about 2 days, we will know if I was 100% right or only 80% right.
That's fascinating. We'll be watching that with bated breaths ourselves. Tom, we also wanted to ask you, we had some friends, some other media professionals that we're colleagues with who were on the cruise, and we also saw it on the social media, and we even watched a video about it, but it was heavily advertised that there were a lot of women hired to come on the cruise who were basically paid to walk around in very scanty bikinis and what have you. What are your thoughts on women being presented in this crypto ecosystem in that way? And what sorts of messages do you think that's sending to girls and young women thinking to enter the space?
That's an interesting question. So, yeah, it was a bit of, I guess, an unfortunate incident. Let me see here. Let me not get myself in trouble. So I was on the prior cruise as well. And as you know, the crypto industry, like the math and science and other STEM fields, it's pretty much dominated by men. And the crypto space and the blockchain space is no different. The prior cruise, there were a lot more men than women on the last cruise. And because this cruise, the entire boat was being rented out and the entire boat was chartered, I guess the organizers felt that there would be a huge disparity between the number of men and the number of women. So the women that were hired to kind of help on the cruise and I guess, provide some kind of balance between the male-female ratio, the women that were hired were women, generally from the Russian region, Russia, Ukraine. And sure, they were a little bit on the younger side. Obviously, like of age, they were between 20 and, probably between 20 and 30. And perhaps they hired a few too many. And also, it looked like not as many people registered for that cruise than they expected. And also, I believe that because it was a cruise, they underestimated how many males would bring a female friend of theirs or their wives or their girlfriends or, other female employees in their companies. So they just mismanaged how many women to, I guess, hire. And it looked worse, I believe, than it actually was. And that was about it. I mean, as far as I understand, the women weren't hired to do anything illicit or bad. And they were specifically told just to be there for, conversation and just to even out that ratio and balance a little bit. I mean, it's not something I would have done as the organizer of that cruise. But again, I'm sure it might completely flip on the next cruise because of the bad PR of that incident. They're probably going to hire none on the next one. And all the male-dominated industry that decided to bring their wives and girlfriends that probably got into a lot of trouble because of the cruise organizers. On the next one, they might go by themselves and they may realize that there aren't any being hired this time to entertain. These things fluctuate and they usually find a balance eventually.
My advice to the organisers would be instead of paying people to come and pay for their flights and the trip on the boat for other, non-crypto people, just pay people like Abheeti and I to jump on the ship and go on a cruise, and every other woman in crypto. We would have happily come on that cruise, but that's by the by. There's one other question that I wanted to ask you. Earlier this year, we interviewed CryptoCat, who was revealed as being involved in a pump and dump scheme. Have you ever been invited to any of these kinds of groups, and what are your thoughts about it?
Yes, the thing. I've never really been invited into those groups. Influencers start those groups. An influencer wouldn't really want me in a group like that because they're the ones that are orchestrating it. Again, people get mad at me for this. I come from traditional Wall Street. Everyone, accuses Goldman Sachs and all the other Wall Streeters of being, the worst of the worst and being scammers and being evil. And I worked at Bear Stearns during the collapse when Bear Stearns went down. Right down the street, Lehman Brothers went down. I knew a lot of people from both of those companies. 95% of the people, probably everybody I've met, were honest, hardworking people. Nobody wanted the company to go down. Nobody wanted to lose their jobs. Nobody wanted to be in a situation where they can't provide for their family. And almost everybody I met when I worked on Wall Street were honest, responsible people. In the crypto space, I feel the complete opposite. On traditional Wall Street, I meet a person, there's a 95% chance he's a very honest person. Here in the crypto space, I feel the complete opposite. 95% of the people I meet are just scammers that want to print their own money. It's so much worse by percentage in this space. So I'm not surprised at all. Most of the people are trying to run some kind of a pump and dump so they can just make money from scammy coins. I get asked all the time to be advisors and promote these scammy projects. And the only thing that comes to my mind is, wow, the person asking me has absolutely no idea who I am. Because if that person knew who I was, I'm the last person they would email or contact. So I was getting so many of those emails and texts that I just walked away from it. I had to hire a couple of people to kind of sift through all that so that I don't have to see it. I'm getting frustrated with her for almost the same reason. I'm just trying to make my communication one way so that I don't have to see any replies back, because 95% of them are so useless that it's almost not even worth it spending so much time looking through nonsense only to find that 5% of useful replies. At this point, it's almost not worth the time spent until the space cleans itself up. And I just don't see the space cleaning itself up until the market falls hard enough and big enough for these scammers to actually lose all their money, or for people for who they lost money to get very, very serious about what they're going to do about these scammers that lost them the money by promoting outright scams to them and getting them to buy into them.
Yeah, it's a tricky thing for new people coming into the space to be able to sort of find the diamond in the rough, isn't it? Because there is just so much available. But we're aware that your time is extremely limited. Two things I wanted to ask you. First of all, when we tweet you to say, hey, Tone, the podcast is out, please don't ignore us. We're not a scam. We want you to retweet for us. Will you do that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yay. Thank you. And secondly, well, actually, there are three things. So secondly, on Telegram, you remember when we met and you showed me your Telegram handle and we started to chat. I'm actually starting to realize how privileged and grateful we are for having this opportunity to talk with you and having that personal connection. But actually, somebody else called tone-vays with an identical photograph and all the rest started to communicate with me as well. And for a while there, I couldn't tell the real you from the pretend you. And you had said to me that quite a few people are pretending to be you, which is tricky. Before we wrap up, can you tell us your favorite quote? The saying that gets you by in the darkest moments, or just something that you've carried with you in your heart throughout your life? A saying, a quote, a mantra, an idea.
Oh, wow. I should have prepared for this one. I honestly do not have one. And that's because throughout my life, I've gone through so many career changes. I started out studying geology, then I went on to being a teacher, then I went and got a master's in financial engineering and worked on Wall Street. Then I became a trader because on Wall Street, that wasn't my job. We were building risk models, but I wanted to be a trader, so I started being a trader. Then I transitioned to being a public speaker. Now I feel like my job as a content creator and a YouTube podcaster. And I'm already like looking at what am I going to do next? What am I going to do after Bitcoin? And it might come sooner than people think. Am I going to stick with being a podcaster? So because I don't stick to one thing, I always transition, I always move on, and I always try to learn new things. I never had any kind of a single slogan because they usually correlate to your life, but my life is so dynamic and has transitioned, and I've never even lived in one place. My family immigrated Russia when I was young, lived in New York, went to university in Florida. Now I spend 10 months traveling the world. So I try not to hold on to anything because everything is flexible, everything is adjustable. You're always learning, and a lot of these, I can come up with a bunch of phrases, but I'd have to really think about them.
Well, can I share mine with you? It's my favorite. It also correlates with my surname, and it's probably the only time in my life history that I've been grateful to have the surname Pass. Would you like to hear it?
Of course.
This too shall pass.
You know, I've seen that, like people have it like tattooed on their arm.
Yeah, everything is transient.
That should be yours, Tone. That should be yours because all of your life stories pass and you move on to other things.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Tone, thank you so much for joining us today. Amy Rose, have you got closing words you'd like to share?
Thanks, Tone. It was an absolute pleasure, and you handled our rough questions pretty well.
Thank you.
I did just want to mention that I did hear as well, and I heard the girls say it themselves, we know speak English. So I was wondering whether they were hired to be in conversation or to be conversation pieces, as my mother used to say in dinner parties. But on that closing note, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us again.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
All right. So I think it got a little bit uncomfortable. We started talking about the Barcelona cruise. I think that got a little bit What do you think?
I think so too. He handled it really well. And I don't know why he got that uncomfortable. It wasn't anything that he had organized. He was just around in that event. So he wasn't the person who hired a whole bunch of Russian, I'm going to say escorts. He didn't call them that, but they were models, escorts. They were hired women.
They were very beautiful, they were very young, they were extremely slim, and they wore very little. So make of that what you will. And from the video that I saw, they didn't speak English, as was confirmed by one of our colleagues, a podcaster who was on the cruise, who got quite vocal around this whole issue too.
And I said to Tone, look, there's one way around this. If you want more women on cruises, if they're not buying tickets, if you've got a budget for $1 million to have a bunch of Russian ladies come onto the boat, how about you reach out to the women who are already in crypto and say, here's a ticket, here's your flights, come on board the Love Boat.
Excuse the pun. Because if the intention really was for having stimulating conversation with people that don't speak English, I guess it was either through sign language, which is open to interpretation, or it was simply not the case. Because if they want to have stimulating conversation, then yes, we need to be getting women on there who are interested in the space and who can comment on things and possibly even challenge some of these ideas and thought leaders.
Well, that'll be entertaining for next year to see what happens, and also to see if we get to go on a cruise.
I won't be wearing a bikini, but I think you'll all be happy about that.
I don't know. I might just wear on to say, haha, this is what happens when you have a cruise.
It was an interesting and varied conversation. I'm extremely grateful that Tone was able to make time during his Australian tour to have a chat with us.
And it's good to know that he's not a pumper and dumper on the cruise. That sounded wrong.
I'd be very surprised if the whole Bitcoin Cash sort of infrastructure crumbles, but that was a pretty interesting sort of barb about the fact that over the next day and a half that it might all come to a grinding halt. That'll keep me glued to his YouTube channel to watch the live stream and to see what developments unfold.
It is going to be juicy, but you'd be surprised as to the sentiment in the Bitcoin Cash groups, Bitcoin Cash, SV, ABC, whatever's going on at the moment. It's all very confusing, but they're very stoic in their position, standing with the Bitcoin Cash team. So there's a lot of debate. This is true, but they don't think it's going anywhere.
I am interested to ask you, though, I'm back onto the models in bikini number. What message do you think that's sending out to young girls in the space, Amy Rose? Because I realise I asked quite a long question and Tone didn't actually address the final part of the question because we got onto other things.
This is my position. Women can wear whatever they want. I don't care if they're wearing bikinis. I don't care who wears a bikini. I don't care if Satoshi wears a bikini. What I do care about is paying people who aren't in the space, paying women who aren't in the space to come on to put a sticker on the boat that there's diversity, when in fact it doesn't diversify the space at all. It is one event that hasn't impacted on the cryptocurrency sphere at all. In fact, it's branded it with a bad taste. So what does it do for young girls who are interested in crypto? First, I don't know many young girls who are interested in crypto, but...
What about our daughters?
Yeah. If women are being sexualized in any way publicly for whatever reason, for whatever they're wearing or whatever they're doing, then it takes away from the person themselves, who they are, their real strengths, their mind, and what they're contributing to the world. For some reason, our society sees women who are in their bikinis as, not massive contributors to the world.
It's kind of like that notion of brawn, even though it may not be muscular, but brawn, not brain. And it's not really a great message to be sending out to young women, whether they're in the crypto space or any other space, because I feel like what it does, it sends out an absolute stereotype, gender role, a classic pigeonholing of this is what women are good for and this is what men are here to talk about. And it's very divisive. I mean, we copped some flack over creating a Women in Blockchain event and we made it very open that men were welcome. And, a third of the room were men who were contributing to the conversation and raving about it. But those men came of their own volition. They certainly weren't paid to be there and they certainly weren't in bikinis. But can you imagine if women ran an event and they hired a whole cohort of men wearing very tight leopard skin testicle holders to the event who didn't speak English and who didn't have an opinion on crypto? Can we just reverse it and see what message that would send out to the male world? It would drive men insane. They would find it so disrespectful. And yet, as women, it seems to be an expectation that we'll just roll over, if you'll excuse the pun, and take it. And I find it really disappointing.
It is disappointing, but we are moving into a better direction. All of the men who have supported the position that what happened on that cruise should not have happened, and women and men who are legitimately excited about cryptocurrency should be on the cruise, or people who wanted to become excited about it. Hiring and using tickets for women whose primary responsibility was to entertain and to look beautiful and, I guess, decorate the ship, it really takes away from the real reason why that event happened.
And I wanted to make it clear, I'm fearing that I'm sounding a bit like a moral high compass here. I don't mean to sound judgmental about the women themselves. Like you said, for me, I don't have an issue against women who have that role in society, but the way that the whole thing was orchestrated and constructed, it felt very, very artificial.
But they'll do it better. People just keep learning. They made a mistake, and I think they're aware of that, and I don't think they're going to do it again. And if they do, just good luck.
Credibility minus.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for the chat today. Always a pleasure to catch up with you. And I guess I shall see you on the other side.
Hi, you've called Abheeti
And Amy Rose.
at Crypto.
Clothesline.
Leave a message after the
Beep.
Okay, 3, 2, 1. Ready?
I understand that you ladies seem to be thinking that blockchain is going to be revolutionising our world and that you are seeing cryptocurrency as the future of money. However, I would like to remind you that when Mr. Edison was creating electricity for the first time, nobody was waffling on podcasts and creating episode after episode after episode about the possible iterations of electricity in the future. I mean, I'm looking at my widescreen TV. I've got my lovely floor lamp. There's all sorts of things we could have talked about way back then, but we didn't waste people's time. I wish you wouldn't either.
Crypto-clothesline.